Rappin' Rodney from Rodney Dangerfield on Revenge of the 80s radio. In the 1980s, comedy took an interesting turn, while legends like Rodney Dangerfield, Don Rickles, and Johnny Carson and the like passed the proverbial baton to the next generation of funny men and women. Dangerfield seemed to have made it his mission to discover and expose future greats. One of them is my guest now, Yakov Smirnoff, who turned the phrase, "What a country," into a phenomenon. He's now referred to, though, as Dr. Yakov Smirnoff. Welcome to Revenge of the 80s Radio, Yakov.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here. Now, while your act was quite timely during the latter years of the Cold War between the U.S. and former Soviet Union, one of the things you said at the time is that you were a comedian in the Soviet Union. Being born in Ukraine, right. That was really no joke. It was
That's
true.
Correct.
What was it like doing comedy in the former Soviet Union?
Yeah. Well, we didn't know any better, so we had the Department of Jokes, which was part of Ministry of Culture, and they would get once a year to approve our material that we were then to perform in different theaters around the country, but it was like our license to perform specific jokes. Otherwise, you would not have that privilege, and you would not veer off the script because it wasn't approved. So it was very much very structured approach to comedy.
Oh, so you couldn't go off the script and say something like, "Well, Joseph Stalin got into a hotel. He said it cost an arm and a leg, but he got in for half price." Ooh, that's terrible.
Yeah, that would get me practicing jokes in Siberia.
Oh, boy. Or even Cleveland, for that matter, but that's a different story.
Yeah, it could be.
Now, I thought you were joking when you did the whole Department of Jokes thing back then.
No, it was real. I mean, again, when you're used to something, you just don't see it as a problem either. It was part of approval process. Unfortunately, a lot of things today in America are becoming so politically correct that you have to basically have a Department of Jokes here. What can you say? What can you not say, etc. So it was, but if people get used to it, and that's what they do.
It's true. We have to have things approved by the Secretary of Whining here in America at this point.
That's what's going on. Yeah.
But Dr. Smirnoff, or Dr. Yakov Smirnoff, if you will, getting out, I would imagine, wasn't easy. How did you escape the Soviet Union?
Well, I was actually lucky because I started performing on a Russian cruise ship. I call it the Love Barge. And I met a lot of Americans who were, at that time, just being tourists on the ship. And I was privileged to talk to them because I was master of ceremonies, so I would have to organize some of the events, and so they would give me an interpreter. Most of people in the Soviet Union had no contact. It was forbidden for us to have contact with foreigners. They had propaganda machine that was very strong. I mean, they would, I had a joke that we had two channels on TV. Channel 1 was propaganda. Channel 2, KGB officer tells you turn back to Channel 1. So that was the norm there. We were, they were controlled. Everything was controlled. And here I am dealing with Americans, people from Australia, people from Canada. They're on the cruise, and they're totally different in terms of their energy, how they're having fun, versus the Soviet people are very constrained and feel that they're not free to laugh at things that may be a little bit questionable, like what if somebody's watching them laughing at something that is being said that might be a criticism to the government, and they'll get in trouble. So that was the tape that was playing on the background of everybody's head. So I could see this contrast between Americans or free country people and the Soviet people. So at that time, Jimmy Carter was making a deal with the Russians because Russians were asking for some wheat and because they were starving. So I got the wind of it, and we applied for a visa, and at that time, basically, we were exchanged for some tons of wheat. So every time now I see a Wonder Bread truck, I salute.
How did you learn English and break into show business after that here in America?
I was very determined that I'm going to do comedy. So I started as a bar boy in Grossinger's Hotel in the Catskills, as a bar boy bringing ice and didn't require much English. And then little by little became a bartender, and that gave me direct access to people who were sitting and drinking in the bar. So I could, test some of my jokes on them, translating them from Russian to English and recognizing that, I have a potentially a way to deliver those jokes and people laugh. And the way I measured it, it was like if they were tipping me well, that means that it was funny. And if they didn't understand the joke, then I wouldn't get much of a tip.
Oh, that's understandable. With me is Yakov Smirnoff, now a doctor on Revenge of the 80s Radio. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but we're just going back in time for a little while because you did manage to get into a couple of movies and some on-camera stuff. You got into some very important stand-up locations, if you will, but
yeah.
It will be 1985 with an HBO special, Rodney Dangerfield's 9th annual Young Comedian special, that is. It would expose you to the entire nation and exponentially elevate your career. How did you and Dangerfield hook up?
I think he was, at that time, I think it might have been a second special or a third. They were looking for comedians that were making headlines. At that time, I had a Miller Lite commercial, and the commercial said that in America, you can always find a party. In Russia, party always finds you. And I think he saw it, or somebody saw it and said, let's book this guy, So the same thing happened with Johnny Carson. They didn't really wanted me to be on the show. The producer, Jim McCauley, was very much against me being on the show. He didn't think that Johnny would like me. And then Johnny saw the commercial and said, this guy's funny. Let's have him in the show. So it worked out very well.
Yakov Smirnoff is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Again, Dr. Yakov Smirnoff. And straight ahead, we're going to talk about his educational journey and have some more fun. Some classic comedy from Yakov Smirnoff. This one was from a show hosted by Dick Clark. Yakov Smirnoff, now Dr. Yakov Smirnoff, is with me now. What a Country was an underrated television show as well as your catchphrase. While it only lasted 1 year, it was a unique concept with some very funny people in it. How did you develop the show and get it on the air?
Actually, it was the people who were producers of, executive producers of Three's Company. After that show went off the air, they were looking for another opportunity, and they approached me about this concept of bunch of underdogs studying for citizenship. And they asked me if I would star in it. I said, sure, I'd like that. And they picked the name What a Country, surprisingly. And I was very pleased. I wish it lasted longer, but, it was 26 episodes on national television, which was pretty nice.
Did you ever get to play tennis with Vijay Amatraj?
I have, yes. I did play tennis in his house several times. It was kind of closer to a joke than actual joke because he didn't have to move at all. And I ran around the whole court, and he just stood there, and it was very funny to watch myself even trying to attempt to play with him. No, I'm not sure if everybody knows who Vijay Amatraj.
Oh, yeah. I used to love watching him when I was younger while playing tennis, yes.
Yeah. He was a great champion from India.
I think he's one of the greatest athletes to come out of that country.
Yeah, that's true.
On the other hand, one probably might have had to know a little more about history to get a lot of the character interactions, like the rivalry between Nikolai Rostropovich, as your character, and George Modok's Mr. Gabo, the Hungarian fellow. The guy who
Yeah.
held a grudge over, what, 1956?
Yeah, wow. You remember more about the show than I do. Wow, that's great.
But it leads me to my next question. How much of your character, Nikolai, was influenced by your own journey to becoming a U.S. citizen?
I think it was pretty close. I mean, my journey to a citizenship is similar to many others, where everybody comes to this country because you want to become a citizen, and so I was very lucky. I was sworn in at the Statue of Liberty inaugural ceremony when they restored the Statue of Liberty, and so I was really had an amazing experience of being in that special location, special setting, in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty. It was a huge honor.
Yakov Smirnoff is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. While the career was going strong, the Soviet Union was flailing.
Yes.
What were your thoughts, though, when the Iron Curtain finally fell?
Well, I wish I was reading the writing on the wall, on that Berlin Wall. It would have said, look for exit strategy. And I didn't read that. I didn't read it. And so it took a little bit of wind out of me when finally the Soviet Union collapsed and David Letterman had a top 10 list on that night of things that will now change. I made number one on the list. Yakov Smirnoff will be out of work.
Oh, man.
And I thought it was very funny. Well, 6 months later, it wasn't. All of my contracts in Vegas, Atlantic City, Reno, Tahoe were not renewed. So I started looking for a place where they did not know that the Soviet Union collapsed. I ended up in Branson, Missouri.
That's where you have a theater now, as a matter of fact.
They still don't know, and I'm not telling.
That's okay, because maybe they just don't want to know.
They don't want to know. It doesn't matter.
On the bright side, though, were you able to go home again?
Oh, yeah. I went back, actually, married a Ukrainian girl. This is my second marriage, and I finally found my soulmate. So I've been going back and forth now to have in-laws there. So yeah, I'm totally feel like I have an ability to go back, but I always see myself as an American. I don't associate myself as Russian or Ukrainian anymore.
Yakov, now for the fun part. Your comedy career continued, but you also went to school here in America, having earned advanced degrees and now a doctorate in global leadership from Pepperdine.
Yes. I'm very proud of it, yes.
Why did you choose global leadership, and what brought you into the world of academia?
Well, originally, it started with recognition that laughter might be an early detecting mechanism for health of the relationship. The reason I discovered that because I went through a divorce, and I realized that laughter was there in the beginning of the relationship, but then later it was gone. And the only people who were laughing were attorneys. And they were laughing all the way to the bank. And I started asking the audience, I said, how many of you remember laughter being a part of the honeymoon stage of the relationship? And everybody in unison was like applauding, yeah. And then I said, any of you would go on the second date if you didn't have laughter in the first date? And nobody would applaud. And it made me realize that it's universal, that laughter is the first thing that we experience when we meet. And then second thing, intimacy. And third thing is we marry and live together. And when things are not going well, laughter is the first thing to go. Second thing is intimacy. Third thing is your house. So once I recognized that pattern, I wanted to study laughter and is there such thing as a law of laughter? Can that be proven scientifically? So I went first to University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school that was established by Benjamin Franklin 300 years ago. Year 2006, I graduated with my master's degree in psychology. Then I became a professor at Missouri State University, teaching a course on happiness and laughter. And now I got my doctorate degree at Pepperdine University from the School of Education and Psychology.
And the dissertation was obviously on the law of laughter.
Law of laughter, yes, LOL, surprisingly. And I was able to prove that there is a formula that most people are not aware of. I compare it to like when people were learning about fire, how to control fire, how to create fire and sustain it. And it took thousands of years for people to recognize how to do it effortlessly. I believe that today humanity is in the place with laughter. We are spending millions of dollars on comedy writers, television shows that are supposed to create laughter, but we can create it easily in our honeymoon stage. And my quest was, what is it that we do that can be repeated later that can create that laughter? And I figured that out.
With me is Yakov Smirnoff on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Chris Cordani here behind the microphone with him. So you have your doctorate. What's the next step? What do you want to do with that?
Great question. I want to go to Disney World.
There you go.
Well, I guess there is a role for me in this new stand-up doctor arena. I believe that there's a major movement right now happening in the country of this intellectual entertainment that I don't know if you're aware of, like Jordan Peterson or other people who are, who are capable to deliver very profound messages that are helping people to improve their lives in the entertaining, very, it's educational, but it's fascinating. And I think people are flocking to that right now. So that's where I think I'm going to go, is that, stand-up doctor that delivers with humor some very life-changing advices.
Jordan Peterson is one of those speakers. He can talk to 3 different generations of people on the same level. And that's very important. That's a lot. That's difficult to do, especially these days. And as a comedian, and you did mention this before, the world of stand-up is a lot different than it was before. It's almost like people are afraid to hit a few things. Comedians used to be edgy. Comedy was different as early as maybe 15 years ago.
I don't know. I don't know if I would agree. They're still continuing to be edgy, just in a different environment. Yeah. There are some. Believe me, I perform at the Comedy Store tonight. I'll every Friday night, if I'm in town, I go do a set there. And boy, they're addressing some very important issues. Somebody like I watched Joe Rogan. Boy, he is very outspoken, very capable to address and confront very edgy topics. So I think it's still alive. I think it's alive since the jesters were, the only people who were able to deliver the message without being beheaded.
Oh yeah,
so
some of them were.
Still there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some of them were bad.
Yeah.
And you're right, but there are a lot of comedians who won't do colleges anymore for that reason. And I know you mentioned Joe Rogan. He, of course, has an incredible podcast. You have a
Yes.
podcast running as well.
Yes. At this point, it's still in the very early stages. I'm really excited about, kind of having Joe Rogan as my hero, as my prototype of somebody who can be curious and interesting to listen to, because he is representing kind of my mindset if I was talking to Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk or anybody like that, I would be asking similar questions. I would want to know. So that's why I think he's so popular.
With me is Yakov Smirnoff. Now, Dr. Yakov Smirnoff on Revenge of the 80s Radio, also businessman. You mentioned Branson, Missouri a while back that you went there. You do have the theater, and we touched on it, but what's happening over there?
Oh, I still own it. It's 2,000-seat theater. I have entertained over 4.5 million people there. I did that full time for like 20 years, and now I'm back in Malibu, so I only go there 2 months out of the year, and you can look up on yakov.com, yakov.com, my schedule when I'm there. But I am, at this point, I'm teaching some guest lecture at Pepperdine. I'm doing my stand-up when I, tour around the country. And in meantime, at my theater, I have some other acts like Acrobats of China, or there's a magician there. And so it's still a nice place to come home to.
And Yakov, of course, you can't really do a lot of the Soviet Union stuff, but I'm pretty sure the current Russia offers a little bit of comedy fodder as well, doesn't it?
I think there is the difference between like the 80s and now, that the Russia at that time, Reagan
Right.
was able to unite the country, and in recognition that it's an evil empire, and everybody gathered behind him with that. Obviously, as you know, in today's climate, it's totally divided the country. So it's not the way that everybody can laugh at the same thing. So when I make jokes about it, I try to kind of walk the fine line. My show is not against left or right. I just kind of stay in the aisle, in the middle.
Well, that's how you unite everybody with comedy. And that's, of course, part of what your
I
doctorate
think
was all
so.
about, too. As a matter of fact, you're
Yeah.
part, yes, exactly. Dr. Yakov Smirnoff, I want to thank you for being with us here on Revenge of the 80s Radio, and best of luck on your endeavors.
Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
And we love having you here. We hope to have you on again. And let's play a track from one of the movies you were in, Yakov, The Money Pit. Rush, Rush from Debbie Harry on Revenge of the 80s Radio.